Hi, welcome to Beloved Blackness, Blog 53. I'm Dr. B. I thought this week I would share with you a concept that's called the window of tolerance. And I think it's really important because as we deal with the impact of racialized violence and the stress and trauma of that racialized violence, it's important for us to be able to have ways to think about what we may need in terms of how to respond to the impact of it. So, window of tolerance is literally this concept that says we all have a certain amount of stress that we have to manage in our day to day lives, okay? The wider our window of tolerance, which means our capacity to be able to tolerate, so tolerance, our ability to be able to tolerate that stress, the wider it is, the less we get rattled by the amount of stress that we have to experience. So it doesn't mean that we don't get rattled, but it's the intensity of how we're rattled. So when we're within that window of tolerance, our feelings feel manageable. Our thoughts and our feelings are able to work hand in hand. We aren't being overly reactive. We aren't being underly reactive. When we're overly reactive, that's called being hyper reactive or hyper aroused. When we're under reactive, that's called hypo aroused. So that's below the window of tolerance. The hyper aroused is above the window of tolerance. So the idea is how to be able to expand our window of tolerance so that the amount of stress that we experience in our day-to-day lives is more tolerable or manageable. So when I've talked to you in the past about the hugs analogy, the soothe part of hugs, remember honesty, uplift, grieve, and then the S is for soothe. So many of those soothe strategies are ways to be able to expand our window of tolerance, okay? So whether we're soothing through ancestral song or soothing in terms of ways in which we connect to one another or soothing in terms of deep breaths that we take or ways in which we may practice meditation. So all of those are soothing strategies. And so I want you to think about over the course of the next week, what can you begin to do to expand your window of tolerance? Because what the research says is persons from marginalized populations, so particularly those of us who are African descent and come from enslaved backgrounds, we have a lot of collective trauma that we have had to endure and are continuing to contend with. So the more that we can expand our window of tolerance personally as well as collectively, then we have more of a capacity to be able to think about how to respond to the stressors in our life. And the hope is that we aren't just responding to stressors, but that having a wider window also allows and gives us space to have our creativity start to flourish, have our ability to be able to be more present with our family and our friends, have our ability to feel more settled and more peace of mind within ourselves so that we can show up the way we want to show up if we're doing work of activism or work of healing, whatever that may be. And so a few examples of things that maybe you can practice over the next week is just start your day by taking maybe 2, 3, if you can, 5 minutes and just center and anchor in your breath. And all that means is when your mind wanders, you just gently and patiently just bring it back to the anchor point of the breath and start to practice that as a daily practice of let me anchor in my breath. Let me anchor in my breath. Let me come back to the present moment and anchor in my breath. Or it could be you decide that you're going to intentionally listen to some music every day, and music that kind of gets you going and allows you to feel kind of more alive in your body and in your mind. It could be that you decide that you want to start doing something like taking up playing the drums, right? Like if you have some drums at home, that you can start actually playing those. Like there's so many ways in which we can help to expand our window of tolerance, which helps us to regulate our stress. And I'll talk more about some strategies next week, but I wanted to introduce that concept to you, the window of tolerance, and to encourage you to think about ways to expand that window of tolerance over the next week. All right, until next vlog, I'm Dr. B.